Alright, so we're gonna make a ring out of this black and white ebony. So first step, cut a chunk off. I don't know, half an inch, whatever width you think you want your ring to be. Obviously a little bit larger because you're going to be sanding it down. It's kind of tricky doing this because sometimes it really wants to grab, so I don't know. I'm not really an expert on bandsaws, so maybe it's got to do with the wax that they put on here, but seems to work all right. Actually, let me make sure this blade is tight. There we go. That's that. Alright, next step, drill a smallish hole in the ring. I find this works a lot better than just going right to your large size, almost your final size. I don't know if you can see this one, but I think maybe the Forstner bits that I have are just kind of crappy, so it split the wood from so much heat, and I was going pretty slow as well, so it helps, I think, at least with maybe cheap drill bits. Drill a small hole first and then go to your larger. Alright, now I have my larger Forstner bit on here. These are really just a cheap set from Woodcraft. They were on sale. I think these are Wood River or something. Made in China. They're not great, but they work. And kind of like all my tools, unless I know I'm going to use it a lot, I usually don't go out and buy something really expensive. So, yeah, this is one of those pieces. So, here we go. I mean, I get nice shavings off of it, but it smokes like crazy. So I try to let it cool down a little bit, because I'm pretty sure it's the heat that's cracking the wood. I'm not putting any crazy amount of pressure on the handle here. I mean, maybe 5 pounds at that. So hopefully we don't crack it. Kind of smells like burning popcorn. It's interesting to smell how different woods smell when they burn like this. Thankfully, I've never had any of the shavings catch on fire. But we're gonna go ahead and vacuum those up a little bit. Yeah, so already right now that piece of wood is almost too hot to keep my fingers on. So I think we're gonna let it sit for a minute and come back. All right, it's been, I don't know, a couple minutes or so. It's still slightly warm, but I don't know, we're about halfway through, so hopefully we can get through it without splitting it. I hope y'all can see this, my hand's not blocking it. I don't normally record myself doing things with this camera, so I'm gonna go ahead and clean off these shavings again. Alright, I don't see any cracks yet, so hopefully it stays that way. I don't know if it'd be better just to go straight through it all in one pass as fast as I can, but I don't know. I kind of make this up as I go. I don't know, I've made maybe half a dozen rings now. Oh, and we're through. So I'm not an expert. Alright, so let's get our ring out of there and see how it looks. And once I get this Forstner bit out of there, I'll use some of this blade and bit. This stuff works pretty good at getting junk off of your router bits, your drill bits, Forstner bits, anything you're cutting wood with. It tends to get gunked up. So here's that. It looks pretty nasty right now, so I'll take this piece of sandpaper and clean it up. So, I don't know if y'all can see that good, but there are no splits. Another thing, some people are really worried about the grain direction. I always buy the turning blanks and, you know, just cut them into chunks the short way, and I've never really had any problems with them falling apart, other than, you know, I think if I get them super hot they start splitting. Oh, we do have a little crack here, so a crack on both sides, really small. So what you can do on that is just put some super glue in there, spray a little accelerator on there, that way you're not waiting around forever, and that'll seal it up pretty good. And that's another way you can finish a ring, is just super glue while you're spinning it. Alright, so now that I got super glue in there, sealing up those little small cracks, in fact I missed a spot here, so I'm going to go ahead and do that before I start cutting out the rough shape on the outside. You want to try not to get too close. I mean, I guess it depends on how thick of a ring you want it to be. But I'm not very precise with this. It's a lot easier for me to get a lot closer with sanding than on the bandsaw. So let me go ahead and glue this up and we'll be right back. Another thing, I find that the thin super glue tends to soak into the wood better than thicker types. I think the stuff I have is kind of medium, so it doesn't soak in too well, but you know, you can always fix that with sanding. Another product you can use is this wood hardener. So if you have some wood that's kind of open grain, it's not a very tight grain like a lot of exotic woods are, you can use that wood hardener, a couple coats of that, and that'll fill in some voids and, you know, just make the wood more stable. It's not wood stabilizer, but I guess it's pretty close. But anyway, so let's try to cut the right shape of this. I kind of got my bandsaw in a corner here, so it's kind of hard to get back here. know if you can see that, but that's probably about as thin as I'd like to go. Some of these spots are actually maybe a little too thin, but it should be alright. Alright, hold on one second, we'll get alright, well here's the next step I do. Sometimes. I don't always use the belt sander, depending on how good I am with the bandsaw. This time it wasn't great. So you try to get off a lot of the big high points. That just makes it easier on the next step. Alright, that's pretty good. I tend to flip the ring over a couple of times just because I know this piece is not level. And this piece on the back here, the platen I think it's called, is not 90 degrees with the base here. So I try to flip it over a couple times just so that it doesn't end up cone shaped. So anyways, we'll go to the next step. And that's right, that's a Dremel and a big vise. So this is my cheap lathe. I guess you could call it lathe, I don't know. But anyways, I got a bunch of these. Basically they're just round sanding stones. I wrap a bunch of electrical tape around them till I get the size that I need. So I want it so it slides on most of the way, but not all the way. That allows me to get on the inside here and bevel it so it feels nice coming off and on, doesn't grab, scrape your hand. So I'll go ahead and spin it here, make sure it's halfway spinning straight. This is a Dremel, I don't know, it's one of the newer ones, model 4300. So it's got adjustable speed. So most of the work I do, I turn it to the slowest speed possible. Any faster and I tend to just, it doesn't sand better, it just eats through sandpaper. In fact, some of this stuff will actually start to melt. And then two, if your ring's not on here very good, and you know these aren't accurate at all, I mean they're just kind of roughed in there. So when you spin it really fast, I've had a ring or two come flying off of here, and that's not really safe. In fact, I should probably put some safety glasses on. So we got that on there. We'll go ahead and turn it on. Looks pretty straight. You don't want to push it on there too hard because then you're definitely going to split your ring. So that's pretty good. So anyways, I start off with some 150 grit. You could probably do lower. I'd rather take longer than cut through too much too quick. So I mean, you don't have to do this. The first ring I made wasn't really round at all on the outside, but it looked cool. It felt nice. So it's really up to, you know, whatever you want to do. But I think for the most part, if people are buying these, they're going to want something fairly round, fairly smooth. So every now and then I'll just stop it, see where we're at. So we're getting pretty good. Got a few spots here that are still pretty rough, so. And you can turn it up a hair. These wider rings sometimes will really bog down the Dremel. And I find too, if you move the sandpaper back and forth, you get a finer finish. It's not as important right now, because we're going to go over it with 320 and then some of these scuffing pads I use. Those, it's much more important to kind of oscillate your paper so that way you get a finer finish. And at this point you can probably start beveling over the edges. And another thing I forgot to mention is if your blank is too wide after you take it off the bandsaw, you can narrow it up really quickly on your belt sander. You can do it on here too, it's just a lot quicker on the belt sander. Alright, let's see where we're at now. So I'd say 99% of it is super smooth. We got two little small cuts in here. They're almost completely gone though. But I really don't want to go too much thinner. So what I'll start to do at this point is work on the inside bevel. So if you fold your sandpaper up so it kind of gets rigid, you can get the inside here. You don't want to apply too much pressure because that can break the ring or cause it to fly out. And that's feeling pretty good. So now what we'll do, we'll take a ring off of here. And I might see a small split. I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell because the way the grain runs on this piece, the grain's running with the ring. Which I don't know if that's really ideal or not, but it seems to work. So anyways, we'll flip the ring over, clean all the sawdust out of there, flip it over, and work on the other side. And again, we'll spin it around, make sure it's going to be halfway balanced on here. It's not fun when these rings go flying across the shop. I've never had one break when it flew off, but you're always worried it's going to break, and it usually happens when you're almost done with the ring. So it's kind of disheartening. And another thing I'll do is, if the ring's kind of loose on here or kind of tight, I'll add or remove electrical tape. So that feels fairly balanced. So turn it on and see what it's doing. Yeah, not bad. Alright, let's see how that feels. Not bad. And anytime you stop your tool, you kind of want to make sure the ring feels fairly tight on there. Alright, we're getting pretty close. So now I'll go over the whole outside with the scuffing pad. And now is when you want to run the scuffing pad up and down, because this will put grooves in it, because it's not very even like sandpaper is. And this is just going to polish that outside. And really, this could be your final step. Alright. Not bad, not bad. So we'll take a closer look at it here, see if there's any major scratches we need to remove. And there's some, so we'll go back around. And I could have used the 320, but I didn't really even use it this time, so I got some 600 grit here we can try. This is way too big of a piece. Alright, let's see how that is. Not bad. Alright, I'll go back with our little scuff pad here. take another look. Looking pretty darn good. So at this point, if you want to go a step further, I got some car rubbing compound. I don't know how necessary this is. It does seem to make the finish nicer, so I'll usually do it. You don't need a ton of this stuff. Just a tiny little bit, get it on there, spread it evenly, spin your Dremel or whatever around by hand, and then go ahead and turn your tool on. Anytime you got like a cloth like this, you want to make sure it's not going to get wrapped around here. You don't want to use a huge piece. That way, you know, if it does get sucked up in there, you can just let go of it. And sometimes I'll go up higher on the speed. Alright, well, the camera cut off, so I don't know how much you missed. But anyways, we're pretty much finished with this. Let's see if we can zoom in kind of close, maybe. Oh man, that zoom focus is not great. There we go. So that turned out pretty good. One thing I haven't done, and I probably won't do this on camera, is just smooth out the inside from the super glue. Let's see if we can get a little closer here. There we go. So really, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes from just a hunk of wood to this. Honestly, when people say, man, you gotta make me one of these, you know, how much do you charge? I'm like, well, it really doesn't take much time. And you know, I guess you can get fancy with inlays and stuff like that. One thing I will do is throw it on my ring manual here, figure out what size it is. So we're about 8.5. I always try each way because these things are never symmetrical. So yeah, it's about 8.5. Let's see if that fits any of these. Yeah, so cool. There we go. And I'll usually throw a little beeswax polish on here. I make my own stuff. It's just beeswax and linseed oil. Feels nice. Doesn't, you know, flake off. It's easy to put back on when you need to. So yeah, so that's pretty much how I make my rings. Hope you all enjoyed this, and if you watched the whole thing, awesome. Thanks for watching.